Good evening, everybody. Having a lot of technical difficulties this afternoon. Someone tried to hack my account, actually a couple of accounts. So I'm just kind of worried about quality of stream. Give me a moment so I can go ahead and make sure that I change the settings so that it goes public. And I may try something as quick as possible with this. I am streaming the YouTube window, so if well, Wendy, so if you're viewing here and you want to switch over to YouTube, you can go ahead and do that and stream to YouTube. There'll be a lot of technical issues tonight. I wasn't complete with everything. I was working on some areas that need to be improved. Should be working. Okay, start up. There we go. Knew it. All right, we might have some issues here, but we'll take care. There we go. Apologize. Had some issues. I had to reset some passwords, etc. Do a few things that I don't normally have to do, especially in the middle of the week. All right, let's get this started. I'm already 4 minutes behind. So, this is Panther and Cage. Welcome to a community-inspired conversation regarding the consequences of breaking down the Black family structure. Okay, this is a part three, and I intend to speak from a very unique Afrocentric perspective. And our focus, just for the record, our focus here on Panther and Cage is to expose the negative narratives that have continued to specifically perpetuate social and cultural bigotry within the Brevard County community. We also exploit the use of those beguiling false narratives that tend to come up every single week by the members of our society who use them in an attempt to navigate their way into leadership positions. We thank you in advance for your real-time feedback within the live stream and in the form of your comments. They're always encouraged. And as we share those real-time comments from the viewers, viewing audience, we'll acknowledge that, what you exactly have to share. And that's going to be an attempt to contribute to the progressive discussions that provide tangible solutions. Now, may I request that those comments possess a degree of relevance, an extreme degree of relevance, if you please, and that's in order to keep these very lengthy and and difficult discussions coherent. All right. If it's your first time joining us, I would like to tell you guys thank you, and I hope that you're able to enjoy. Now, last week we began. Well, let me go ahead and get this on because this is important. Now, last week we began reviewing where we left off regarding the consequences of removing the fathers from the family structure. And shortly after that, what we did, fix this. Now, what we did was we began finishing talking about deindustrialization. And then shortly after that, Amber, thank you, Amber, for your question. She asked a very good question. What if the father is broken and not a good example? Do you continue to allow them to influence the children just for the sake of the children having a father, or do you find a replacement? Now, without giving away one of the cultural reasons why the Black father may be broken, I was trying to do that last week, but we'll get into it this week. Slightly, we'll begin to get into it, and I may conclude it. But I gave my opinion last week on the steps that needed to be taken to identify if the man is broken before bringing a Black child into the situation. There's scientific reasons why I said that. But discovering the man's family philosophy is one of those things. The marriage expectations is something you talk about during the dating phase, and the relationship standards. They all collectively work in your favor to give any woman a subjective idea of his commitment to family, or at least his commitment to his children. Okay. Now, I finished by telling her that she would be justified in stopping any patterns of negative influences from having an impact on her children, even if that meant to the point of finding another father figure to positively influence the children. Okay. Now, I tried to be objective with my answer and ensure that my conclusion wasn't distorted with my own self-serving interests. Okay. But I had to even reference some of my personal experiences that justified my actions of cutting off negative influences that threaten my children personally. Okay. Now, we resumed, at that point, finishing our look into the impact of deindustrialization in order to understand the nexus that was between crime, deindustrialization, and the urban crisis, any urban crisis, any part of the urban crisis, I should say. I touched on a few issues, such as the higher rates of unemployment about 2 weeks ago for African Americans. And we talked about the social hypocrisy within the American immigration issue, with examples of how racism subconsciously embedded in the ideal of American exceptionalism. And that was when I showed the Border Patrol agents stopping the Haitian immigrants from moving into the country. It's a very controversial issue. We'll talk about it in the future. But as far as this review, we continue to review the content featuring Dr. Cress Welsing's assessment on the breakdown of the Black family structure, because through community demands that I'd done weeks before, months before, we collectively acknowledged, or at least I acknowledged, that the collective was actually asking these questions. 3 or 4 people technically now, but there were hundreds when we first started. They acknowledged that this was a community need. Okay. So we examined the concepts or the context of concepts like the father and the mother of the family being at the constant mercy of the growth of the entire family, We talked about the concepts like transferring additional responsibility and influence traditionally held by father, from the father to the mother, and it generated a couple of questions. I'm not going to read all the questions. We do have them. You can check them out from last week's live stream, but we do have some here in case you want to go over those in detail. But I'm going to pick a few out. One was about what are the considerations when the father, who is known as the traditional provider, is removed from the family structure? Simple question, right? One of the more intermediate questions was, are we as a society supposed to think that removing the father from the family structure is a normal action that will have minimal or insignificant impact? It's a very important question I want answered. I did ask a question of what contribution of mothers to the nuclear family structure do you think should be weighed as heavily as unconditional love? And the only person that did, I submitted it into the 40 plus, and the only person that answered it was Christina Cash, and she basically said, compassion, I believe is what she said. So we know that's empathy, compassion is a very good answer, because it's pretty easy to look and see what you as a mother would provide, your family structure as opposed to unconditional love. There's many things that they can provide, but I thought to ask the question, which one should be weighed as heavily as unconditional love? Because I just wanted to feel out the role of mother, and actually I'm kind of sick and tired of the role of mother and the role of father being undervalued, especially in our community. And I say that because if it was truly valued, they wouldn't have the narrative, okay, that generated this entire thing. Now, the last question was, if you know that a mother's job is never done, why would you inundate the mother with the additional role of the father and believe that the consequences would be minimal or so insignificant that there would be no impact on the future of that family structure? That's a very important question. That should be asked every time someone wants to literally talk about what we're going to talk about tonight, but when they go to talk about, how single mother culture, is okay. Okay. There's a lot to it. So let me get to it. These questions that I mentioned earlier, they were generated when we applied just basic common sense to the idea of separating the father from the Black nuclear family structure. When I concluded the live stream last week, I had this promise that the live stream would give single mothers the opportunity to contribute to what they feel are notable attributes or abilities that the mothers exclusively contribute to the family structure. So I gave that chance, okay? And after a week, I basically only got that one answer. And I'm trying to make sense, of this whole conversion exchange rate. That's where some of those questions came from. So I was trying to make sense of that. How can anyone actually go through that? I know people have that answer. They're kind of holding back. But remember, we get further on the conversation. Or if I have a talk with those single mothers that I talked to before, I'm not really going to be objective at that point. You had your opportunity, right? Now, I posed that question. Or someone, sorry. I'll pose that question again to the 60 and up crowd, okay? That part of the Black community specifically, okay? Because they were the ones who had to make that decision, right? Now, I want to talk about the social, when I asked that, I want them to talk about the social pressure of the third wave feminism that you're going to hear Melanie King comment on, which I believe we'll get to Melanie King a little bit later, if not next week. So the consequences of removing the Black father from the family structure. Give me a second. Let me put this on the screen because I want to make sure we keep up. All right. Now, allow me to clarify more on the no man. I got to go back because I got to clarify on the no man in the house rule. Now, it's been said that the no man in the house rule was a simple myth. However, it's a legitimate truth that, like the Indian Removal Act and the transatlantic slave trade, of course, both of those are stains upon the American legacy. Some people are interested in really minimizing and overlooking that. Okay. Now, there are some disingenuous people who fail to clarify that the no man in the house rule was often used by various states as a financial income qualifying policy. And I say that because that's what Florida did, okay? There will be others attempting to claim that there's a no man in the house rule. And they'll be trying to cover up the fact that, you know, most two-parent working households are disqualified for government subsidies, okay? If a woman slash mother, okay, applies for a social insurance program, she would have to remain under a guideline that enforced a poverty level. And in most cases, if the man or the father was working, or he was somehow financially contributing to the home, that income would then, if reported, would disqualify the resulting, would disqualify the mother, resulting in a situation where the case would be closed. And we showed that. That was the intent of showing the clip of Claudine. Okay, that was the whole point. Now, that concept is what Melanie King was reiterating about what happened in the past to help create a contributing part of the urban crisis. And that urban crisis is Black fathers not being in the home, okay? Now, Melanie King acknowledged that because of certain social influences, and she said clearly, third wave feminism specifically, she said that women made a trade-off for their men for a check, all right? Now, here are some facts. In some of those cases, the requirement of immediately reporting a change in a family status and the structure, it impacts whether a man is allowed to reside within the home as a provider. Some states require that guests in the home aren't even allowed to stay more than a week, right? Others have restrictions that they implemented by private landlords, okay? And this is where I had some personal experience in this, okay? It was a private landlords who had accept those housing program vouchers, okay? And it was on their stipulations. That is where the circumstances became a strain on this particular family structure, okay? Now, some state-funded programs don't even apply for men, okay? Now, I know someone's gonna say, yes, they do, blah, 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 blah. Okay, check this out. This has always been some of the factors that have impacted generations, okay? And some of our leaders have observed this and said nothing, okay? For those of you who think that what I just said was untrue, I really want you to voice your opinion. I don't see you in here tonight, but I know you'll be trying to be in my inbox later. Don't do it.
They didn't tell us that if you give up the man, you're going to take one of these things and it's worse and it will destroy your nation. They didn't give us that information. They made us think that it was some kind of glorified position to brag about the fact that I got my own job, my own credit card, my own car, so I don't need no man. I don't even know how we got that mixed up. Ain't none of that got nothing to do with being with no man. We have some serious relationship problems that nobody has been able to address us on because everybody wants to pretend that this is not going on. Over 60% of our women are single, widowed, separated, or divorced. They don't have a man. I just came out of Florida and they got a housing complex that the Urban League built, which is a Black organization that is for women and children only. They say they don't allow any men in there. I didn't have time to deal with it, but I talked about them real bad. That's the silliest program I've ever heard of. You know them women that had men if they got a bunch of children. They need fathers. They need protection. We hear about the drug problem that we have in our projects across the country. It's one of the major places that we have a drug problem. We talk about the great strength that we have as Black women. Well, the welfare department don't rent government apartments to single Black men. Those apartments belong to Black women who are allowing this to go on in their home. Everybody start going for self. Then they bring the welfare system in and tell us in order to feed and clothe and house our children, we have to give up our man. You have to put the man out of the house. When the white farm wife goes to the government for subsidy for the farm, they don't tell her to get rid of the farmer. They keep that family together. But in the Black community, they make it a requirement because they want to keep endorsing into the Black community that the Black man is no good and that he is not deserving of respect. He is not deserving of us letting him give us any protection or instruction, and that we are better than them.
Let me try something. Now that was Shirazad Ali. And Shirazad Shirzad Ali. Let me know if you hear an echo or if the sound goes out. Okay, so I just need you to do that for me. Shirzad Ali is an author who you saw there in like a 2 minute video. And she was talking in that particular video, she was talking about one of her several books. Okay. Now, the book she was referring to was The Black Man's Guide to Understanding the Black Woman, right? She was speaking on the Urban League, you heard in the video. She was talking about the Urban League housing program that's located here in Florida. And she wanted to challenge their way of thinking that substituting these government subsidies for the role of father had no negative consequences, but she didn't have the time, right? So she spoke on how the role of father affected drugs being distributed within the community. Okay, this is a fact. Okay, a lot of people want to ignore this and want to gloss over that, but know that good fathers, they do have an effect on the drugs being distributed within the community. She exposed the fact that those social insurance programs meant to supplement the broken Black family structure actually brought devastation to the relationship between the Black woman and the Black man. Okay. Her observation that the requirements for the government subsidy distribution weren't equally enforced or not being equally enforced. She said, well, it should make you critically think about the intention behind the entire disparity. Okay. Now, you have to ask yourself, if you're thinking about it, you have to ask yourself, could the intention be that they didn't want the Black community to think that the Black man isn't any good, as she was talking about, that he isn't fit to give instruction or provide protection, or that he's even worthy of respect? You have to ask that question. So we also have to ask where that concept of devaluing and removing Black fathers out of the nuclear family structure originally came from. Okay. Now, I don't see anybody. I'll see two people in the audience, but I don't see any comments. This is where you can, if you understand this answer or you want to have I'll go ahead and I'll pull back and highlight any comments that you may share. But I want to continue moving forward because we're going to have to ask this, we're going to look into answering this question that I just asked. I have to. I want to share something real quick. Let's change it a little bit. So let's see if I can get us there, which I can. All right. Now, in the interest of rebuilding the Black nuclear family, we have to deeply observe where it's broken. Okay. From the traditions that held us together to the terrors that forced the majority of us to see the value in unity, from understanding society's intense rejection that compelled us to innovate, to the supernatural standard of driving that same society forward with our cultural contributions. We've defined quality in the persistence of our existence. There's no debate about it. Our determination to rise has redefined excellence so profoundly that when anyone refers to Black, it's synonymous to excellence. Okay. So, how did our nuclear family structure become so damaged? This is where the conversation can divulge into the history of the Black African American family structure and how it survived colonization, how it survived. And let me mention colonization. We had a Black family structure because we had the tradition of jumping the broom. Okay. During Jim Crow, we had systemic racist policies, and I don't really have to go into detail with that. But Loving versus Virginia for interracial relationships show you if they were there, they definitely didn't want the Black family structure together. And I'll get to you why, and this is why they promoted feminism, right? Now, feminism brought about this new attitude we see today of the I don't need a man movement, right? And it's had an impact upon Black culture today. So um, I guess that upsets some people. But yes, when you say the word Black excellence, it's synonymous with excellence. And there's a reason for that, okay? Um, there are some people who are very disingenuous not to acknowledge what about education. Um, because I hear it all the time. They say it's education, Anthony, it's education, Anthony. But I feel they're being disingenuous because they won't acknowledge what about education, is causing the whole community to undervalue each other's roles and undervalue those roles enough to create the problems that impact the entire community, okay? The whole village, right? So we're going to lightly touch on the miseducation of a nation.
I was helping my daughter study last night for the Virginia Standards of Learning exams, and I saw that what they were teaching my child was the status of early Africans was unknown, and that they were probably slaves or servants. It's one thing to say, we're not going to cover that. It's another thing to lie to my child and say that their history is unknown and that they were probably servants or slaves before they came to America. Part of this miseducation is the reason for our current country's climate. If my child gives an answer other than what's on that paper, that she's considered wrong. So how do I educate my child and teach her that her history is powerful, that her history is amazing, what her classmates are learning or what they carry with them when they become senior leaders, executives? Right now, I'm working in the CIA as the chief within the Diversity and Inclusion Office, and I'm fighting these battles every day to change minds, to change hearts, to change unconscious bias, because they're not unconscious, they're taught at this age to our children. And I don't know what can be done about that, but I figured I'd start with you all.
Sorry, that kind of messed up, but that's because of the headset is also a microphone. So, but that was Miseducation of the Nation 1, okay? Now that was, hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Micaiah Little. And she was sharing that there were gross errors embedded within the education curriculum that perpetuate the ignorance that is socially embedded in America. Now, when people say it's education, Anthony, what about education? I want you to elaborate. Don't just say it's education, because then we're having this just generalized conversation that can be misinterpreted or misconceived, right? So I want you to actually answer it. What is it about education? And because I specifically say this all the time. But that's what she said. She said part of this miseducation is the reason for our country's current climate. Okay. The Virginia Standards of Learning held a standard of insincerity within its education system. And you got to think of that. That's an education system that's in a state that held the first colony of America, right? And it clearly shows that it was intentionally taught at a young age, right? And then I want to pose this theoretical scenario, just taking the educational exam questions, right? Because here's where I was thinking about this originally when I first reviewed this. You got an exam with the multiple choice answers, right? But all the options that are chosen, all the options that are given to you to be made available as the answer are incorrect, right? So when you have that kind of situation, and then I get people who are saying, is education, Anthony? One, you don't think I know that. Two, it's like, think about this. If the answers are already manipulated and they're all wrong, what are you doing to the child? What is the purpose of a standard exam? And I debated calling somebody a new in the education system, but they're in the education system in a different area, a different county. So I didn't want to even bother with it. I didn't want to inundate them with it. Pretty much know the answer, but the purpose of taking this exam is to show what they've studied. Okay, so if the exam questions are wrong, what did they study? How did they study something incorrect to the point that it's now you want this to become second nature or sunk into the subconscious mind so that it's regurgitated at a point where they don't even have to really think about it, consciously think about it, right? But then, we hear about it all the time. We hear it's education, right? But then I get this culture shock conversation about how backward society is appearing. And I calmly make the assessment that some of the behavior reflected was the simple result of the conditioning that was psychologically survived. It's survived long enough in the minds of the people, and then it becomes physically manifest, right? We understand that. I want to say that. I was going to say things are made twice. Once in the mind, then it becomes a physical reality. But I won't even go into that. What I will say is we're talking about how that psychological condition occurred and where the people who display this cognitive dissonance we have to understand the perpetuation of the psychological conditioning of the devaluing of Black men, the valuing of themselves, actually. And when I talk about that, I'm specifically referring to the self-hate, which is defined as the continual feelings of inadequacy, feelings of guilt, and truly, sometimes hidden low self-esteem. And that has been woven into, I would say, black men in America. We could say the Black community altogether, but I'll just say Black men, because I know I'm trying to not get detailed here, but I can tell you some things that were taught to me. And then some people say stuff to me all the time, and they don't understand what they're doing. They don't understand what they're, the weight of what they say. Then they may understand, and they're literally trying to break you down because they don't like that you just said that Black is synonymous with excellence. Lead me to question that, right? So when we talk about where this came from, we have to actually look. And some people say I go back too far. No, I actually go back long enough because I know I'm a Black man. I know. Okay. We'll go far back as this. There's some evidence for it previously, but I will state this as far as American culture. This is as far back as documented.
They said the best thing to keep stuff away from Black folks is to put it where? In the book. We reverse nature by burning and pulling one civilized apart and bullwhipping the other to the point of death, all in her presence. By her being left alone, unprotected, with the male image destroyed, the ordeal caused her to move from her psychological dependent state to a frozen independent state. In this frozen psychological state of independence, she will raise her male and female offspring in reversed roles. For fear of the young male's life, she will psychologically train him to be mentally weak and dependent, but physically strong. Because she has become psychologically independent, she will train her female offspring to be psychologically independent. What have you got? You've got the nigger woman out front and the man behind and scared. This is a perfect situation for sound sleep and economic.
The last word was economic. Test that. See if that's what you read, or what she read, excuse me, was an excerpt from what is known as the Willie Lynch letter and the making of a slave. Right? It was a letter written to slave owners, specifically those slave owners and slave traders who were having fears of slave rebellion. There are numerous heavy-hearted conversations that we can have about slave rebellion, but I don't want you to assume that I'm intentionally just going to gloss over that fact. All right? I just want to talk about, the methods, right? So the Willie Lynch letter was written with tactics to deter rebellion among the slave class. Okay. The first thing that I'm going to point out is that she read was, "We reverse nature." Okay. This statement, "we reverse nature," annotates the previous, that the previous state that they were found in Africa, those individuals who they call Negroes to be, which I won't get into that. Those individuals that they call Negro, they stated they were brutally, that they were unnaturally, let's say this, it's hard to say it. So when they found the Africans there, they always said that they were savages, they were brutes. And the first sentence of that, clearly within that first sentence that she read, their intent was to reverse that nature or reverse the nature, right? So there's a confliction here. They wanted to reverse the nature. And listen to what they said when she read it. This is an instruction to reverse the nature. They intend to do this by what? By pulling, burning, and pulling one civilized, and there's a term civilized inward apart, right? Then bullwhipping the others to the point of death, right? So they stated they were civilized, confliction, okay, because they always say they're savages or whatnot when they talk about this in books. And then they say they're a civilized one. So if they found the civilized ones, the ones that were stronger, that were more intelligent or whatever, they basically pulled them apart and bullwhipped the others to the point of death. Now, check this out. Here's the method now. The next thing that I'm going to point out is that it identified the African as civilized. Just already stated that, but this basically acknowledged that most of the things that are taught in the education system about the savagery and the barbarity of the Europeans, that the Europeans claimed they found when they invaded the countries of Africa, were lies, complete and utter lies. The lies that they found savagery were just elaborate lies to justify an immoral preservation of the transatlantic slave trade. Now, it reveals that they wanted to beat any sign of civility from the African slaves. It shows that they wanted African slaves to live in a state of perpetual and permanent mediocrity. That's what that was. That's the clear intent, right? Of the tactics that were instructed to use, she talked about the tactic of pulling an African slave apart. And it was done in a very specific way, okay? If anyone's ever seen a detailed graphic representation of the Levi's jean label, you'll notice that the jeans are tied to two different ropes, and then the other ends of the ropes are tied to two horses, and then the horses are facing opposite directions. Let me go ahead and put it on the screen for you. Don't want you to see this. Really want you to see. You can see there that there are two silhouettes of men, right? And they're holding a bullwhip, and it looks like they're whipping it, in the air to crack it in the air, right? We talked about how to use bullwhips. Those actions will startle the horses, who will try to run in the opposite directions as fast as they can. Now, what happens here, what you're seeing happen here, is the genes are so strong that they are not torn apart, right? All one has to do is understand that this line of the Willie Lynch letter was trying to explain. It was placing the African slave in the position of those Levi's jeans that you see there on the screen, between those two horses, right? The action was done literally to tear African men, to tear whole African men apart before they're civilized. Excuse me. They were trying to do that before the other civilized African slaves. And then they took those civilized African slaves and then they beat them with those same bullwhips, right? Now, what this execution method is called, as you can see on the screen, is called drawn and quartered, okay? Now, that's when a person's arms and legs are tied to horses and the horses are whipped up until the body is pulled apart. Now, the term quartered is because in the 1600s, this was done with four horses pulling a rope tied to each of the four human appendages, right? Pulling them apart in four sections called quarters, right? One of those most important parts, or one of the most important parts of that line was when it finished out the sentence, all in her presence. Now, this is important. This is absolutely important. All in her presence, okay? What it was talking about is this brutal torture was to be done in the presence of the African slave woman, okay? They were doing that to psychologically damage her natural dependence upon the African man. Again, she had a natural dependence, nature. They were trying to reverse it. This is what was done to psychologically instill upon the Black African woman that Black African man was no longer the spearhead part of her existence, okay? It even tells the reader to marvel at the psychological fallout of the Black African woman. It said that the torture that she would witness of him being drawn and quartered would cause her to move from her psychological dependent state to a frozen independent state, where she will raise her male and female offspring in reversed roles. Wow. Remember, the intent was to change nature. It explains that she's suffering trauma. And as a result of her fear of the young male's life, her young son's life, it being in danger. And we always had these conversations about when I said the mother is an instructor earlier a couple of weeks ago, and I said all Black mothers are instructors. And in that conversation about being woke or being aware of your surroundings, this is what we're talking about. That's real. That is 100% real. No one can argue with that. Okay? You'd be a fool to do so. I don't want to call you a fool. The Bible says don't do that. But I'll just tell you this. You would be a fool to argue that. That is real. That is real life. Okay? Now, for fear of her young son's life in danger, and pay attention, Willie Taylor, because this is what we were talking about years ago. And I said to you, and I think you understood, but the audience didn't get it. All right. For fear that her young son's life would be in danger, she would psychologically train him to be mentally weak. Okay. Remember, Charles Barkley talked about how, like, it's one of the things in the Black culture is like they want to, they'll pick at you if you're intelligent, or if you speak a certain way, or if you speak, in a form that shows signs of high intelligence or whatnot. How they bully you. So the mother has trained the son to be psychologically or mentally weak and dependent, okay, but physically strong. And that sounds like a lot like, the self-hating Black men that are fearful of actually being a man, all right? Now, her psychological frozen independent state would also train the female offspring, her daughters, to be also psychologically independent, okay? Meaning no one's coming to save you. You by yourself. I missed some comments. I apologize. Let me go ahead and go back to it, because I know this is a very important person in the community that knows very well what I'm talking about. What wasn't true? Oh, I'm assuming you're saying that we were uncivilized, the narrative that we were uncivilized. And yeah, to rip us apart. Okay. Sorry, I need to keep up with the comments. I usually have seen it, but here on this topic, a lot of things are going through the head right now, and I'm trying to actually make sure I convey this because this is important. But this mentally delimited state of psychological independence is something that that I have to. For a long time, I've been asking that we have psychologists kind of call out, and I know there are 2 or 3 that I know personally that I don't know them, but I'm associated with them personally. I've asked them questions and I've gotten no answers back. And this is what I feel like. I feel like a lot of psychologists are holding out when it comes to this. This is important, and this is something that needs to be addressed in our community specifically. And this is one of the reasons why when they say Black men need to seek out mental health, you can't, if you can acknowledge this simple concept, and you won't even, like, what's the point of going? There's no point in understanding, because you're going to delude us into not thinking about this, not understanding this. This is at the heart of what it is. This is at the heart of discipline within our community, but I'm not going to get into that conversation, okay? But like I said, I wonder just how courageous they are when we're talking about this issue. Or I wonder, could they be gatekeepers? But I know this is a very serious discussion. It's a very serious discussion to dive further into, okay? And we don't have time tonight to elaborate on the other principles of the Willie Lynch letter and making the slave further. But I do want to point out that the writer's perspective of that Willie Lynch letter has a perspective of psychological superiority, okay? And how the result that the N-word woman, right, would be out front with a man behind her mentally weak, dependent, and scared. Um, that's the changed nature that the tactics intended. That's what he intended. And it started with, it stated that, it was a perfect situation for sound sleep, which is the antonym, woke, right? And economics. The last word she said was economics. Why would she say economics? I'll give you an answer, Rob. Let you see it, because these videos speak more than I can say.
This is what black people look like. It could represent black fraternities, sororities, black churches. And what you will notice about these beautiful, educated, and money black people is that everybody's doing their own thing. Caught up in a Eurocentric value of rugged individualism, survival of the fittest. It's a trick. There is no power here, brothers and sisters. Willie Lynch understood this. This is where all the power is. Whether you're at the center of your own network or a part of other networks, this is where all the power is. There's a beautiful African proverb that says that when spiders unite, they can tie up a lion.
When spiders unite, they can tie up a lion. You have to really think critically about these tactics, not only the effects of the physical damage that these methods caused upon generations of descendants of American slavery, but the potential immeasurable depth of psychological damage that they actually caused. Now, we see direct evidence of this African-American psyche in our day-to-day functions. And we know that they're encouraged to, or we're encouraged to forget its impact, okay? Yet in the name of inclusion, we're told to study the Holocaust and the impact it had upon American culture. Now, kind of going off the cuff here, because we're at 47. I maybe give 15 more minutes, whatever. But when we start talking about how the black father or the husband felt powerless to the slave owners' rape and torture of women alone. And let me get this back on the screen real quick. It's important for me to show this. Now we start talking about how the black father of the husband, how he felt powerless to the slave owners' rape and torture of the women. And you got to think about it. They didn't want to physically harm the women as much because they had value, and the value they had was to sexually assault this woman at their leisure. They would have someone to raise their children and someone to cook, the food. Would make the slave owner's wife or the woman of the house or the mistress of the house. It would make her job a lot easier to have, maids, handmaidens of that time. So when we start talking about this role of the black woman being psychologically independent in her existence from the time of slavery, where she would have to do the bidding of the so-called master, this kind of put the black man at a place where he would probably be having animosity, of course, and feeling a little bit powerless, feeling depressed and down. So she's training him on top of what he's seeing and what he's experiencing. If she's training him to be psychologically dependent and mentally weak, you have to think about that. And this is done for generations. Okay, I can say 300 years. Some people say 400 years. I say 400 years because we know the slavery was before 1619. 1619 was first documented. Doesn't mean that that it didn't exist before then. Because I see a lot of people who have concepts in their mind, like the word white didn't exist till 16. So we can discuss that on a different time. So my point is that understand the black man's psyche at that point, the psychological warfare that he's, or the psychological fallout that he's dealing with from this psychological warfare that was played on the black woman, and the physical warfare that was played out on his body. This is an issue. This is a very deep-seated issue, one that isn't discussed, but you see it play out every day. This whole man versus woman, this gender war, this fighting, this I don't need a man, I'm not taking her to the Cheesecake Factory kind of. That's what this stuff is. Okay, we're trying to find a way back to each other, and we're doing this in our younger years, being ignorant and not understanding that we're playing out something that was already done. Now, that last video where he showed this web, this network, he said whether you're the center of the network or in an independent area of that network or whatever, you're still within power. You're still in the place of power. Those who run a business understand and know how powerful a network is. When we're fighting each other, Black men and Black women, we are breaking up the opportunity to be within that network. We're any place in that network. We're directly at direct center, we're off to the left, a little off to the right. Either way, we're destroying that opportunity. Okay. And understand, like you said, separated and operating, you might have the bag, but you still have no power. You need to learn how to co-allocate that power and use it for voting at the very least. We never do block voting. That's what Harry T. Moore intended for us, but somehow we don't seem to do that. So anyway, seeing no comments. Getting back to Dr. Welsing and what she said about depression goes back to the Black nuclear family structure. Okay, let me get this off the screen right now because we're going to get to the next phase, but getting close to cutting it tonight. Dr. Welsing said, if children are depressed, these are some of the things that they will do. She said, if children are suffering depression and dependency, deprivation, they will become preoccupied with sex prematurely. Therefore, we get teen pregnancies. Now, I recently sampled some information through the new Black media regarding demographics statistics, citing that 1 out of 5 Black women are survivors of sexual assault. That's crazy. I want everybody to understand we're going to be touching on the general issues of pedophilia, sexual assault, and spousal abuse. Okay, that's what that covers. That we have a conversation to have. Stop ignoring it. Stop moving past it and thinking that it's going to solve itself. Okay. The other statistic that came across was 42 to 49% of Black women become pregnant before 20 years of age. 49%, everybody, at the highest, 49%. That's half. That's a staggering number to hear. Those statistics are combined to open the door to one of the most important issues that commonly happens within our community to our young girls. Okay, outside of the fact that 41% of Black women are victims of sexual coercion, sexual assault, young teenage girls are putting themselves in the position. Hear me out. Outside of those statistics, young teenage girls are putting themselves in the position to be sexually exploited at the risk of them secretly seeking out older men in the Black community. Okay. Now, whether unwittingly or intentionally, we know that these younger teenage girls start trying to become sexually involved with older men who have access to money, drugs, and other privileges that come with the specific forms of adult life. Okay. Now, in some ways, young Black teenage girls are putting themselves in a position to be sexually coerced and exploited because the teenage girls are seeking acknowledgement that's earned from the genuine woman. Okay. And I don't mean just the average woman. I mean the kind of woman where her existence unveils that she undoubtedly moves with such conviction that others can clearly see that her marriage is important to her. Okay. So it's to show these young girls do want to be married. I'm pretty sure they do want to be married. But the woman that they're looking at, the kind of woman that values and honors her husband, I always say the Proverbs 31 type of woman. But because of the guidance that the father, the true father, is not present, okay, the wisdom cannot extend into the teenage girl's decision-making ability, all right? And that leaves her unprotected, all right? Her mind is not shored up with the wisdom to be determined on keeping discretion, all right? That's important. Having discernment, the ability to be able to see past a flash of emotion, the quality of desires, the significance of representation, and the depth of time or in terms of the future, okay? And that's in regard to preserving her value, all right? These are things that I teach my daughter, okay? Even though I know she doesn't truly comprehend some of them yet, I get a deer in the headlights look every now and then, but I have to make sure I beat that, into her. Don't like the choice of words, but the fact that the Black teenage girls are seeking acknowledgement that is earned of a genuine woman immediately reveals the fact that two things are relevant, all right? Two things are relevant for tonight's discussion. One, the presence of a woman, a genuine woman in a household is so crucial to the psyche of young Black girls. That's a fact, okay? I don't think anybody disagrees with that, right? It's fundamentally necessary to the mental or psychological structure of young Black girls, right? Now think about that, Black fathers. Now I'm talking to the dads. Think about that. The importance of the Black mother's representation is critical for the development of the young Black girl, okay? So it's a simple. They have to see good women in order to be good women. So that means that's on us, on our selection, and it's important that we also talk about, but I don't have time, but we also have to talk about I have to elaborate a little bit on the difference between white mothers raising young Black girls. And I'm just going to say not to do it, but I'm not saying not to do it. I'm saying that white mothers raising young Black girls, it does increase the risk and subscribes them to risk of them raising that young Black girl in an environment that misconceives any and dang near all things that are Afrocentric, all right? So that can miseducate the young Black girl on her identity, and it'll then create the increased possibility that risk, which predisposes the Black girl to grow into this mentality of self-hatred that we were talking about, okay? So I'm just saying, if you're a white mother raising a young Black girl, you have to be conscious of how you're raising her, because you cannot raise her to, this, I see a lot of it where they try to push away the Afrocentric side of things, and they try to get this girl, which you're setting this girl up for a lot of damage, okay? Whether either community or the other, you're going to set her up for some mental health issues. Girls are very delicate already enough, but I'm just make sure I'm stating that this is what the Black community is talking about when they always attack, or address any white woman who's raising a young Black child. Okay. Now, so many things came to mind. I just remember where the young Black boy was being raised by the white mother, and she was letting him wear dresses, and it was just like the other concept, all right? But the second concept that I was saying, which was important, the second concept that Black teenage girls are seeking the kind of acknowledgement that's earned of a genuine woman is that young Black girls are misconceiving the idea that a genuine woman is centered around her sexuality. And that is a slippery slope, okay? Especially for us fathers, all right? It's a slippery slope for us fathers. We're trying to show our daughters, what a genuine woman is completely comprised of, all right? Now, it's at that point, and this is important for everybody to hear, okay? It's at that point where we have to humble ourselves, dads, and then we take a small step back and allow for that special, irreplaceable connection between the mother that's supposed to be there and present in the life. So we allow that connection, the irreplaceable connection between the mother and the daughter, we allow that to naturally flourish, all right? Now, biologically, okay, so I'm just point this out because somebody will say that was a bunch of, no, it wasn't. Because biologically, young Black girls receive 100% of their mitochondrial DNA from their mothers. That's something women carry, fellas. All right, we don't have that. All right, so it stands to reason that other connections, all right, the fact that physical connection is there stands to reason that other connections remain similar to mothers and daughters. All right, if they exclusively get mitochondrial DNA, what else do they get that we don't know about? Right? Mothers are more likely to understand their daughters are coming, where they're coming from when they're faced with an issue like believing or believing that being a genuine woman is centered around a woman's sexuality. Okay, it is at that point specifically that we may find resolution to that 42 to 49% of Black women are becoming pregnant before 20 years of age. All right. So that's important. I just want to say, those statistics, if we couple those statistics, that I just stated with the statistic that says 61% of Black women in America have children, that means that approximately only 12% of those mothers are potentially prepared. 12% of the 61% of Black women, of the 20 million Black women, okay, are prepared to raise those children. All right. Majority of 20-year-old women are not, they're not financially or even emotionally prepared for parenthood. So, and I'm only superficially going here, okay? I have to, all right? But that's a huge factor when addressing Black single motherhood culture in America. Okay, that's something you don't hear the Jason Whitlocks and Shamika Michelle's and Candace Owens talk about. That's why I hate when they speak, because they're not getting into the heart of this and understanding what may be the reason for it. Okay, they just come out and Candace Owens say it's ratchet culture, and I get this. Some stuff she doesn't understand about that, but I'm going to tell you this: where did that come from? Where did the devaluation of being a wife come from? Okay, it didn't just come out of anywhere, come out of nowhere, right? So the issue requires, for a solution, it requires to so deep of a dive into the life struggles of a mother in today's modern society, and where can we find the data about that kind of stuff, right? Can we trust the mainstream media? No. So that means that the Black single mother has a wealth of information to provide our society, okay? And you can pick how or even choose to share that information nowadays. But I would think that writing a book would be the best for a number of reasons that I'm not going to elaborate on because we're so far on right now. But there are only 39% of Black women in America that are without children. Okay, now of those 39%, some may be considered ineligible heterosexual bachelorettes for one reason or another. So that limits the available candidates down to an even further lower number. And we already know the likelihood of, like I said, this whole Cheesecake Factory fall-offs and all that other stuff. However, not getting into this whole gender thing, but let me go ahead and show you a video so you can see, so I can substantiate what we're talking about. And be careful. This is going to be, I apologize for the language. This is going to be tough. It's going to be real. I want you to pay attention to this.
Older niggas got more than the little niggas that's my age, which I'm 15. What the fuck can this 15, 16-year-old boy do for me? Nothing. Bitch, I need school clothes, I need money, I need my hair done, I need this, I need that. So what you gonna resort to? What you know? And they was doing shit for me, and yeah.
And doing shit to her.
They weren't just giving me the money just because I want to give it to you, but
they was molesting her.
I was giving it up willingly, but since I was underage, so that's molestation. I'm not gonna say it because I wanted to do it, but I knew
you did it out of necessity.
Yeah, I did it because that's what I felt like I needed to do. Because who the fuck else was doing it?
It's not uncommon at all. That kind of situation is prevalent in the Black community. Okay, as you can see, there's an example of it, right? There's no denying evidence of this existence, because not only does the statistics bear this out, with 42 to 49% of Black women become pregnant before age 20, but we all witness girls dating older men, at least at the earliest, such as high school, right? That may affect the high school dropout ratio, and it'll affect the adult education enrollment, okay? I haven't hashed out the specific numbers about that yet. I didn't want to look into that. I didn't have time. I had some issues going on. But anyone who knows the details, you're more than willing to share them if you like. This issue also touches on the sexual assault and the pedophilia that happens within the community. Not that this is exclusive to the Black community. Let me make sure I state that, but it's something directly impacting the quality of fathers. Being measured for the use of the Black fathers don't want to be fathers narrative, okay? Now, the point is to reveal that we know that in our community, that is a mentality that is present in the minds of to the least of 12-year-old girls, where they're pre-planning or pre-selecting their family structure. All right. Now, I got that because I watched this particular video. And I know other people have seen it, but there's a lot of disbelief around it. Some people are saying that they don't believe it.
With eighth grade girls, and I asked them to tell me what their goals were. This one particular young lady said that she wanted to have 2 kids. So I said, so are you going to have a husband? And she said, nope. And I said, please tell me why you would choose in the 8th grade to have a goal of having 2 kids and not be married. She said, because if I'm married to him, I can't collect child support. And then she said, why should I marry a man that I have kids by? He might have issues or something. He might be on drugs. And I said, well, if he's too bad to be your husband, do you really think he's going to make a better father?
Now, a lot of people said that they didn't believe that they asked that little girl and she would say something like that, and they didn't believe it. But I can tell you, I know from personal experience, I know some individuals that were middle school girls and were actually thinking about stuff like this. Okay. Now, I'm not sure the original source of that video. I love to just always state the original source. So you can go back and look at the whole video. I usually look at the whole video and I don't say anything. And I use that, as when I'm having a discussion, because someone will come and they'll point something out and I'll direct them to where the whole video is. And then I'll bring them back and I say, you're welcome to come back and we can discuss this further. I never really they never come back to discuss it further. I don't know. Maybe they think I'm just blowing smoke at their boat, but I don't know. But like I said, I'm not sure the original source of that video, but it was something I found on the Black Fathers page on Instagram. And thought it was extremely relevant, like the video that was previous. But it, was shown to acknowledge the substantial single motherhood culture being prevalent in our community, right? And the pertinent questions about that video are, where did this little 12-year-old girl get the idea from? Where did she get that idea from? You think she saw it? You wonder about her choices. She clearly stated that she understood, from what she understood child support was. So then you got to ask that question. Then you got to ask, is child support incentivizing single motherhood culture? Highly debatable conversation. And that's where I'm going to probably end it tonight. We'll get later on next week. I'll jump right into the dropouts, high school dropouts, which I heard that, found out through research that we're doing pretty good here in Brevard County. But I want everybody to don't be shy. Don't be quiet now. All of a sudden we start getting into the meat potatoes of what the community needs, and I get everybody get quiet. Or some people, don't want to send me an email to join your group or something like that or whatever. I need y'all to start talking. If you ain't talking to me, I'm not coming. I'm telling you, I'm tired of hearing the same old things. I'm really interested in where we're going to go from here. There should be a psychologist in the comment section saying, see me. I'll send you some private messages in a little bit. We can talk about this. That's where we should be at. We should be there. Someone should be talking about, oh yeah, black young girls or whatever. They, just throw some more statistics at me. I hate statistics, but throw them at me, and then tell me why that exists. Because I can tell you why. I can tell you why there's 42 to 49% of black women are getting pregnant before age 20. Because a lot of that is just not being educated enough and understanding and being selective enough and getting out there early and being young and naive, and then getting with the wrong guy and then getting pregnant. And now, like I said, it affects the adult education enrollment. It affects the high school dropout issue. So I want to ask those questions. Where do little girls like that, where do they get these ideas from? Understanding that child support, using that as an incentive. The stuff just don't drop out of the air for nothing, out of nothing. Don't just materialize out of nothing. So those are the issues that we're going to talk about. Like I said, we're going to discuss that a little further, but we're going to go directly into the dropout rates. We're going to look at dropout rates here in Brevard County, give you guys a head start. You already know what's going on. We're going to look at the percentages of the dropout rates that are associated to poverty. All right. Not only are we going to do that, we're also going to take a quick look at the drugs and gangs and destructive behavior. Got a couple of videos for us to see. We can talk through it because this is where your black on black crime, all you fans, here it starts to come. We're going to talk about gangs, right? So we're going to talk about the reasons for it, why. So be ready. Be ready. Make sure they're relevant and be ready. But other than that, I just want to bring and talk about this issue. It's a very important issue. Like I said, it talks about sexual coercion, sexual assault, pedophilia, teen pregnancy, and what depression can do as far as, and where it comes from. So we talked on two major issues tonight, and I just want to just reiterate that. And I'll be looking forward to our conversation. I may take a break next week, depending on. I may actually go right into it. But next week when I get onto it, I'm not barely going to do a review. I'm going to jump right into it so we can get through this, because I got a lot of material that I got to cover, or a lot of material I have to push through. Okay, so I thank you all for participating tonight. I saw a few, maybe 2 or 3 people come in, pop in, and leave. Thank you very much, Stone and Mallet, for your participation. I appreciate your comments, and anybody else who's out there and whatnot. You already know how to get in contact with me. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for your participation. And until next time, next week, next Wednesday, I'll try to do it 6:30 instead of 7, if I can get through all this technical stuff. And until then, I wish you guys a good night. I want you guys to manifest authentic love for each other, hope for enduring peace, and may the Most High guide your paths.